Hello and welcome to A Church Without Walls. I'm Joy, wife of Pastor Dave, who normally does these podcasts, but for a change you've got me today. I'm really looking forward to bringing you a word that I believe is a word that God has laid upon my heart for you today, and I really hope it blesses you. I'm going to get straight into the preach, and I'm going to read. Now I've got quite a lengthy reading, so please bear with me. I'm going to put my glasses on and I'm going to read a few verses from the book of Ruth. Now Ruth is one of my favourite Bible characters. I know we all have favourites, don't we? And Ruth, the story of Ruth and Naomi is just one of my ultimate favourite stories in the Bible, but there's a lot of truth and goodness to be gleaned from this passage of scripture that I'm going to read. So I'm going to start by reading. I'm reading about 12 or 13 verses, so do bear with me, but it's worth listening to. And it's from Ruth chapter 2, and it's entitled Ruth Gleans in Boaz's Field. It starts off and it says, "Now Naomi had a relative of her husband, a man of great wealth and influence, from the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, 'Please let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after one of the reapers, in whose sight I may find favour.' Naomi said to her, 'Go, my daughter.' So Ruth went, picked up the leftover grain in a field after the reapers, and she happened to spot the plot of land belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. It was then that Boaz came back from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, 'The Lord be with you.' And they answered, 'The Lord bless you.' Then Boaz said to his servant who was in charge of the reapers, 'Whose young woman is this?' The servant in charge of the reapers answered, 'She is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab.' And she said, 'Please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves.' So she came and has continued gathering grain from early morning until now, except when she sat resting for a little while in the field house. Then Boaz said to Ruth, 'Listen carefully, my daughter. Do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but stay here close by my maids. Watch which field they reap and follow behind them. I have commanded the servants not to touch you. And when you are thirsty, go to the water jars and drink from what the servants draw.' Then she kneeled face downward, bowing to the ground, and said to him, 'Why have I found favour in your eyes that you should notice me when I'm a foreigner?' Boaz answered her, 'I have been made fully aware of everything that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. And now you have left your father and mother and the land of your birth, and have come to a people that you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for your kindness, and may your reward be full from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge.' And then she said, 'Let me find favour in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your maidservant, though I am not as one of your maidservants.'" Okay, thank you for bearing with me whilst I read all of those verses, but I will be referring back to them as well. I've got a word today, and my title is, "Who is in your field?" Okay, who is in your field? Now then, your field, I don't mean a literal field of standing in the middle of a muddy field. I don't actually mean that, but who is in your world? Who is in your life? Okay? You know, it's so important who we do life with. Really important. And you know, who is in your field? We've got friends in our field, haven't we? Friends in our life, relationships. So important that we make the right choices. If I could ask you a question, who has an influence on you? Just think about that for a moment. Who is important to you? Now, I'm sure you can instantly think, faces will come to you, to your mind, and names of people who are influential in your life and important to you. Do the people in your field remember when I'm saying field, what I actually mean, in your world, in your life. Do the people in your field actually encourage you? Do they build you up? Do they cheer you on? Oh, I love being a cheerleader. I do. I love being a cheerleader. And I love having cheerleaders in my life. People who I know that whatever situation I'm in, they're behind you. They're cheering you on. Do you know, if I'd been younger now, I think I would have gone to cheerleading classes. They didn't have them in my day. But I just love the thought of just cheering somebody on, you know. Do the people in your field help you to grow and to thrive? If not, some of those people who are in your field might need to leave, okay? You might need to open the gate to your field and let them out, kindly. Some people who are in your field, they might actually leave by choice. They might decide, this is the time for me to leave this field. This is the time for me to remove myself from your world. Some people you might have to distance yourself from. You know, it's important to know, and this is a lesson I've had to learn really recently over the last year. It's important to know that not everyone will stay in your field, okay? Not everyone is there forever. You know, what we've got to learn and what we've got to realise, and I'm talking to myself here probably more than anybody else, what I have got to learn is not to take it personally. Now, sometimes it's hard because we do take things personally when people leave our life, don't we? For whatever reason it is, we do take it personally. But we need to remember that sometimes it's just the way of life. It's just the way that things go. Ruth, in our story here, she lost her husband. You know, he died and left her. She lost her daughter-in-law. No, she didn't. She lost her sister-in-law, who had also lost her husband. She lost her sister-in-law, who went back to the country that she was from. So she was left without a husband, you know, without a sister-in-law, who I would probably have thought was probably one of our very best friends. She was left without them. But she wasn't on her own. She still had somebody in her field. She still had Naomi, her mother-in-law. But you know, not everyone who leaves your field is necessarily a bad person. It doesn't mean they're bad. It doesn't. It may be that just at this time, they are not in God's plan for your life. They're not in God's plan for the season that you are in or that He has taken you into. So first lesson to learn, don't take it personally, okay? You know, some people leave our field, they leave our lives for very different reasons. You know, some people are just in our life for a season and we just have to love and appreciate them whilst they are there. But some are there for the long haul. Oh, you know, I love those long haul people. Those people who stand by you through every single season of your life. Doesn't mean you have to see them all the time. It doesn't even mean you have to be on the phone to them all the time or messaging them all the time. But you know they are there. They are there in your field. What I would encourage you today to do, make sure the people who are in your field, who are in your life, are the right people. The right people for the right season. Choose wisely who you do life with. We have a choice. We have a choice. And I would just encourage and urge you to choose wisely. So my kind of going, you know, kind of back to the beginning, I've got a title really today that is actually Favour in the Field. Favour in the Field. Do you know, favour's not a word that we use a lot these days. It's not a word that we hear a lot, but what it means is, favour actually means gracious kindness. I love that. Absolutely love that. I love gracious kindness. It's kind of a word, it sounds like it comes out of a Charles Dickens, doesn't it? Story or something. Gracious kindness. You can imagine little tiny Tim in Charles Dickens, in the Christmas story, using those words. Gracious kindness. I love, one of my favourite sayings is, in a world where you can be anything, be kind. Be kind. Not just any kind of kind. Be graciously kind. Graciously kind. And do you know what? Ruth, in our story, in our account, Ruth found favour at the most unexpected place, in a field, in an actual field. A place that she probably didn't want to be in. It's probably not what she had planned for her future. It probably wasn't. When she met and fell in love with Naomi's son, 10 years previously, I'm sure she didn't think she would end up in a field picking up leftovers. Leftovers, I'm sure she didn't. Ruth was loyal. Her loyalty to Naomi took her to an unfamiliar place. I don't know where you are today, but you may be in an unfamiliar place. You know something, we don't always know the reason why things happen, but a lot of years ago now, we moved to an unfamiliar place. We moved from our house near the sea, where we had a sea view of the sea, obviously, and we moved to the country. Now then, we moved up to Northumberland, to the country, and it was different. We went from having a sea view to having a farming view, and we would open our window, open our curtains on a morning, and we could see the cows. We even had the sheep on the village green one day running loose on the village green. It was so different. And it was unfamiliar to me. But my mum and dad used to come every Monday night for something to eat to our house. And my mum used to say, "Oh, this is fantastic. It's just like a holiday." But I used to long to be back home where I could see the sea. It was unfamiliar. So I kind of know what it's like to be taken out of my comfort zone and placed somewhere different. And this is what happened to Ruth. Her loyalty to her mother-in-law took her out of her comfort zone and brought her into a field. Now, the first point I had was, who is in your field? We've talked about that, and I'm going to move on to the second point. What is in your field? So we've talked about who is in your field. Now I want to talk just for a few moments about what is in your field. Are you living in a field of favour, or are you living in a field of famine? Okay? Because Ruth experienced both, and the chances are that so will you, and so have I. I've experienced times of favour, great favour, and I've experienced times of famine. Okay? But God can speak to us in both places. We want God's favour in our field, in the place that we're in. Now, famine, that's another word, isn't it? Famine is an extreme scarcity of something. Okay? That's what the dictionary definition is of a famine. An extreme scarcity of something. Now then, we've all of us who've lived through this most recent pandemic have lived through a time of extreme scarcity, haven't we? If you remember back, we sometimes can kind of forget that it ever happened, but the time was where we had to go and queue outside of a shop to buy a loaf of bread. I can't believe that was in my lifetime. I just can't believe it happened. We used to have to queue at the petrol station for fuel. before my time, in the war, in the First and the Second World War, I understand and I know from hearing, not because I was there, because I wasn't, that there were ration books. And so you would be given a ration book and you would go to the local shop, and because there was just extreme scarcity, you could only have so much of something at the one time, okay? But do you know what? That famine, that lockdown didn't last forever, did it? And so what I want you to know today is that God can turn your season of famine into a season of favour. Just think about that for a moment. That is a brilliant thought. It's such a good thought that God can turn your famine into favour. He can turn your emptiness, your loneliness, your season of drought into a season of unbelievable favour. You know, in Ruth chapter 2, verse 3, it tells us that Ruth picked up the leftovers. Okay, so she wasn't getting the big bountiful supply. She was getting what everybody else left over. You know, and amazingly, out of those leftovers, verse 14 of Ruth chapter 2 says, she ate until she was satisfied. God didn't leave her. God's not going to leave you. You might be in a place of famine, but God can still be in that place. Still be in that place. She went from a place of emptiness to a place of fullness. From a famine to favour. And the best was still to come. In Ruth chapter 2, verses 4 to 7, it talks about how Ruth met another love. She met somebody she did not expect to meet. She met Boaz, and out of a place of leftover, a place of famine, she came from leftover to love. Isn't that lovely? Isn't that lovely? You know, leftovers are all that God needs to perform a miracle. God doesn't need great big quantities of anything. He just needs the leftovers, and God can perform a miracle. I don't know about you, but my mum could make a miracle out of leftovers, right? So Sunday lunchtime, we would have a feast. We would have a huge Sunday lunch. But what was left over, she would keep for the next day. And it didn't look like leftovers. It was an absolute feast the next day. So out of leftover Sunday dinner became a fry up for a Monday tea. And it was, I'm telling you, lovely. Okay? So if we can make something out of our small leftovers, how much more can God make out of the leftovers of our life? You know, you might be in a field, in a place in your life where you think, I'm unimportant, I'm insignificant, but God thinks otherwise. And I believe that somebody needs to hear that today, church. I believe that you need to know that you are not unimportant. You are not insignificant. You are important. God thinks differently. You know, and God showed favour to Ruth. She was an unknown woman from an insignificant place, probably. You know, not known to everybody, not known by many. But God took her and he showed her favour. God values and loves you, and he has a plan for your good, okay? He wants to show you favour in your field. The field, the place where you are right now. Where is your field? Point number 3. Where is your field? I'll tell you where your field is. Right here. Right where you are now, church. This is where your field is. Right where God has placed you now. Okay? In Ruth chapter 1, the chapter before we read chapter 2, verse 16, It says here, this is Ruth speaking to Naomi, her mother-in-law. And it says, do not urge or ask me to leave you. I will go where you go. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. How good is that? How good is that? She wasn't going to desert Naomi at her time of need. You know, stay planted where you are. Stay rooted. Stay faithful. And stay committed. Do you know your field might be your job, right? Your job, your family, your church. You might be in a physical church today, or you might be an online church like we are today. But if you are committed to that field, God will use you in that area. Okay? Stay committed, stay planted, stay rooted, stay faithful. Okay? Number 4, I'm coming to the end of this just short word that I hope and I really pray will have been an encouragement to you. But point number 4, stay in your field. Okay? Stay in your field. Ruth chapter 2 verse 8 says this. Boaz talking to Ruth, and he said, don't leave this field. Okay? Don't leave this field. Stay where you are. Just think about that for a minute. Sometimes we're too busy looking across at the next field, aren't we? Looking across at the next field. Stay in this field. Ruth chapter 2, verses 10 and 12. Ruth questioned her favour. Why? Why was she being favoured? Why was she being blessed? So, Ruth chapter 2 says this, verse 10. She kneeled face downward, bowing to the ground, and said to Boaz, why have I found favour in your eyes that you should notice me? When I'm a foreigner, I don't belong here, that's what she was saying. I'm a stranger in a foreign land. Why have I found favour in your eyes? And Boaz answered her, I have been made fully aware of everything that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, and how you've left your father and mother and the land of your birth, and you have come to a people that you did not know before. So Ruth was rewarded. She was rewarded by Boaz because she stayed in her field. Okay? It says in verse 14, she ate until she was satisfied, and she even had some left over for Naomi. God's not a stingy God. We don't serve a stingy God. We serve a God who is our provider, a God who is more than enough. You know, God's favour is limitless, absolutely limitless. It's undeserved. What have we done to deserve God's favour? We haven't really done anything, have we? But if you stay faithful in the field that you are in the place where God has planted you, sometimes God's favour is unexpected, and sometimes that's the best type of favour, when it's unexpected and comes out of nowhere. And one thing is for certain, God's favour is always more than enough for us. You know, have you ever been to an all-you-can-eat buffet? And you know, some people you see, if you go to a carvery or you go to an all-you-can-eat buffet, and they pile their plate up massive mound of food. I think I used to do that when I was younger. I can't do it now so much. And instead of going back, you can go back. God's not going to withdraw his favour. He's not going to say, right, you've got 10 minutes, starting now, go, 1, 2, 3. And you're not on a clock counting down the minutes until his favour's withdrawn, because he's not going to withdraw his favour. God's favour is for you, and it is more than enough. Sometimes we get greedy and we're trying to put it all in at once, but it's not going to be withdrawn. It's going to be there for us. It's going to be there, like the all-you-can-eat buffet. It's not going to disappear. It's there. They keep coming out and filling it up. And God's favour's like that. It's more upon more. It is more than enough. It's enough for us to share, to give to others. If you stay in your field, the place where God has planted you, this is not a maybe, this is a definite. God will, okay? God will supply, not might, God will supply every one of your needs. He will supply, and you will be satisfied with more than enough of God's favour. Zechariah 9 verse 12 says this: God will, remember that, will, not might, not maybe, God will supply, restore, double that which we have lost or been robbed of. I don't know how you are feeling today. I don't know whether you are feeling that you have lost something that meant so much to you and you feel robbed. God's going to restore. God's going to restore more than you could ever think or imagine. He will not leave you bereft. He will not leave you empty. He is going to restore double, absolutely double that which you have lost or been robbed of. Okay? Romans 8 verse 28, a verse probably all known, you probably know it better than me, but it says, all things work together for good. The working together can take time. Doesn't always happen overnight. And sometimes when we're in our field, we might get the itchy feet and just think, I want to be in their field over there. It looks so much more fun than my field. My field looks, a bit barren at the moment. But God's not going to rob you. He's not going to leave you barren. He's not going to leave you empty and hungry forever. He will restore to you double. Double. Isn't that amazing? Do you know something? Some things have to be worked on. Now then, there's not many things I'm good at cooking or baking. I would never ever go on or be asked to go on Bake Off because I couldn't bake a cake to save my life. I couldn't. But one thing I can bake a good corned beef pie. Okay? A good northern corned beef pie. And I'm not kidding you. My dad used to call my pies Desperate Dan pies. If you know what that is. Desperate Dan. Great big pie, right? But it doesn't just arrive like that. And if I've got all of my ingredients out, to make your pastry, if you get your flour and your butter and your water and you just put it in 3 separate piles and waited for the pastry, it's not going to happen, is it? You've got to mix it together. You've got to work it together to get your pastry. You've got to roll it out. You've got to fill it with your corned beef and potato. You've got to roll out the lid. You've got to put it on and you've got to make the pie. It wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be a corned beef pie if it was just piles of ingredients. They've got to be worked together, put together. And once they're put together and they're cooked, it's amazing. Now you might be in the process at this present time of God working something out for you, just kneading away at you, mixing together, mixing the ingredients of your blessing together. but don't give up, okay? Because once your corned beef pie comes out of the oven, it's amazing, okay? It's amazing, but it's got to go through the process, okay? Your field might look a bit of a mess right now, but God is working everything together for your good. God is working everything in your favour. And I'm going to tell you something today, church. You will find favour in your field if you stay where you are. We can't always see it. We can't always feel it. We can't sometimes even imagine it, because where we are now seems a long way from where we want to be. But God is working it out, kneading away, mixing your blessing together. And honestly, I'm telling you, it's going to be worth the wait. It's worth the time in the oven. You don't get your corned beef pie out of the oven before it's finished cooking, or it'll just be a raw mess. It won't be the same. You've got to wait. Do you know, you might, as I've said earlier on, you might be looking across at somebody else's field and thinking, it's just not fair. My field's hard. I want to be in that field. It's full of flowers and it looks beautiful. But do you know what? Don't be jealous. Don't be envious of someone else's field, because what God is doing for somebody else, that's for them in their field. The grass is not always greener on the other side of the fence and in somebody else's field. So if I could encourage you of one thing today, church, just as we come to a close, be content in your field, in the place that God has planted you, in the place where you are, because He has favour, and I believe you are going to find favour in your field. Okay? I hope that's been all right. I hope that's been an encouragement to you. I pray God's blessing upon you in the next week. You know, if you need us, if you want us to pray for you, you can share anything with us. Get in touch with us. Get in touch with myself or my husband Dave, Pastor Dave, and we are here for you. Have a great week. Enjoy your summer and enjoy the field you are in right now.